All right, thank you everybody for coming. If we have anybody who's still in the memorabilia room, the exhibition hall, we encourage you to come into the lecture hall here and join us as we kick off the third annual symposium on hybrid scholarship at Yale University, Beyond Boundaries. And this event is one that is organized every year by a team led by Kathy DeRose, who's the manager of the Digital Humanities Lab. This event for the last 3 years really has been the work of Kathy, and it's been supported by a great team of others inside and outside the lab. We're especially happy to work alongside Yale STEAM, which is a student-led group here at Yale University. STEAM, as most of you know, stands for STEM plus Arts and Humanities with a silent H. We're really excited to be working with them, and they've helped us in putting together the program for today's events. So the exciting thing about Beyond Boundaries, of course, is that it brings together folks from all parts of the scholarly spectrum at Yale University. And today, you're going to hear talks and roundtable discussions for folks who work in our robust museums, galleries, and libraries organizations. You're going to hear from undergraduates, graduate students, and faculty. It's really exciting to have all these parts of what makes Yale University great here today. When Kathy asked me to welcome you all to the hall, I asked her, what are the things I need to do? Because you've organized everything, you've managed to get the room renovated, all this great program, really excited. What could I possibly do that would be useful? And she said two things. The first thing to do is to make sure that everybody's PowerPoint works. So I'm going to be up here as we switch between different keynote presentations, different lightning talks to make sure that everybody's PowerPoint is working well. And she said the other thing you need to do is to keep us on track. So for all of our wonderful lightning talk presenters, I'm going to have little 1-minute warnings, and then this is the cane that yanks you off the stage, just so we can get through everybody's work. And so with that, I'd like to kick off our lightning talks, which are going to be presentations by students and postdoctoral associates on subjects related to digital humanities and STEAM projects here at Yale. And the first of our lightning talks is going to be science stories using IIIF and Wikidata to create a linked data web application. And this is going to be a presentation by Kenneth Seals-Nutt and Thornton. So Ken and Kat, come on up.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this opportunity. My name is Kenneth Seals-Nutt. I'm a senior computer science major, and I'm working in concurrent with Thornton, who is a CLIR fellow of computer science, as well as in the digital preservation department in the library. And what we have been working on this past year is called Science Stories. And what that is a application that we're going to leverage two resources that are widely used by other projects here at Yale. The first being Wikidata, and the second being the IIIF framework. And I'll touch a little bit on what each one is, as well as give a brief demo of the application and what we've built so far. So first, I'd like to start by just explaining the team again. Thornton is a CLIR fellow of computer science. I'm a senior undergrad student here, and this also doubles as my senior project for the computer science department, and Professor Benedict Brown is our faculty advisor for this. And so I'll first give the high-level goals of the project, and then break it down into what things are being used within the project. So our first goal is making a visual storytelling application of academic research. One thing that we found with today's great resources of computing, as well as a lot of frameworks that have been built on the web, is that we can renovate how we go about explaining our scientific and academic research to the public. One thing that we found is we all do great research here in these institutions, but if someone that doesn't have access to Yale's catalog or another catalog of interest, it's really difficult and cumbersome to find out this information. So our first goal was using images, videos, multimedia, and incorporating that with our academic research to paint the picture of who we're actually researching and provide more contextual information there. And then we're also going to expand this out using the Wikimedia to crowdsource some of the content. One thing that is really beneficial of a lot of research projects is these stories can be told in a lot of people don't have to do all of the busy work or all of the overhead work of finding out all of this information that other people have already researched. So if we can find a way to leverage more crowdsourced content, incorporate that with scholarly and academic research, we'll be able to tell more about the person. And I'll also demo how IIIF connects a lot of research institutions together through this. It allows for authorship as well as annotations and citations to be transferred from institution to institution in a very safe way that allows a lot of interactivity for the users as well. And so ultimately, the goal is to bridge the gap between information that's currently in print, digitizing that, and putting it on the web and making it accessible. And the project as a whole, the main reason why we decided to go about this is to celebrate 150 years of women at Yale, which is coming up next year. And so what we wanted to do is, Kat has been doing research on the early women at Yale for the past 2 years, and she approached me with the research that she's been doing, and I thought it was completely fascinating, and we both came to the consensus that more people should be able to know about this information and not just be able to read a paper about it, but also be able to interact with it. So we're starting this project on these first 5 women because they have resources in a lot of different areas on Yale's campus. And so we're starting here to show that we can leverage all of Yale's research across the library, as well as the Peabody Museum, as well as the department and the faculty, to all have a part in telling the story, not just a library or not just a museum on campus. And so first, I'll explain a little bit about what Wikidata is for those of you all who do not know. It's a lot of people are familiar with Wikipedia, the English Wikipedia. Wikidata is another one of the projects that the Wikimedia Foundation has adopted. And what it is it's machine-readable open-link data. And that's a long phrase, but essentially it allows people to create these statements. And my mouse shows. So, for example, this is Grace Hopper's item on Wikidata right now. And so it's very clear statements of what the bare bones data is about this person. And it goes on pretty lengthy, but it just gives you an idea. So for example, instance of human, image, and then it has the link to it, sex, gender, female. So now we can feed that information to a computer, and it's all unique, identified with these identifiers here. And so that allows not only humans to be able to read and understand this information, but also using algorithms to curate this data, as well as to know that you've hit exactly what you're looking for in terms of research. And then we're coupling this with using IIIF, which stands for the International Image Interoperability Framework. And what that does is it's a standard set of image APIs that a lot of research institutions came together to determine this is how we're going to transfer the metadata about our pictures when we're sharing these images. So instead of having people just copy and paste or download images off the web, now you can export a JSON package that has all of the metadata. So that includes the licensing, the what's actually descriptions of what actually in the images, and outside of just a caption, links to where this resource is, and if, for example, if it's digitized, we can link back to what the actual collection is in the archive that it's being referenced to. And so I like this picture on the side here because it shows how we can make this practical. For example, this is a display in Boston College right now where, as you know, you can't really have the public handle really old manuscripts and text, so this would give you the possibility to digitize that information and have users flip through the book page by page in a much more interactive and personal manner than just by staring at whatever page that's there. And so I will quickly just explain that what our application does is it's going to give you the ability to combine both the information on the Wikimedia Foundation, YouTube videos, as well as books and any other content that we can find all into one place. And I'll just do a brief demo of what that looks like. Right now, this is in a prototype phase. And so it takes you to this landing page. And right off the bat, it shows the first 5 women that we're planning to do research on. And when you click on them, it shows you a little description about who there is, and it's pulling this information from Wikipedia, and then you can view their story here. And we decided to go the slides method, so you click through, and these are all not just for one person. This is just to show the extent of how the application is going to work. So this is all not for one person. But for example, this is a IIIF image viewer right here, and you can hover over who's in the image and understand more about the content, and click on it, and as well as have all of the information on how to cite the source and give credits and attributions. And then on the very last slide, it'll show you all of the current Wikidata information about them. And so yeah, that's where we're headed, what we've built so far, and we're planning to present this, the first official demo of our first 5 science stories at the Women's Faculty Forum in May, as well as we'll be presenting the full prototype at the IIIF conference in DC. And we're submitting a paper tonight, actually, for presenting this to the International Semantic Web Conference in October. So thank you guys very much for your time.
Let's just jump ahead to Amy Giuliano, who's going to be speaking on Abroad but Now Accessible, VR Educational Tours.
My name's Amy Giuliano. I study religion and the visual arts here at Yale University. And I wanted to begin by inviting you to imagine that you're standing at the threshold of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. You see bronze doors, monumental bronze doors towering at 5 times your height above you, and a guide beckons you into a wide nave pierced with shafts of light and immediately directs your attention to the right, where you see Michelangelo's Pietà. As you walk around this masterpiece and consider its various angles, the guide describes to you the genius of Michelangelo and of Renaissance humanism. So what I just described to you is the dream of one of my students. Let's see. Her name's Alex. Alex longs to study abroad in Rome and especially wants to study some of the art and architecture of the city. However, cost and opportunity prevent her from doing so. And Alex is not alone. In fact, less than 2% of US college students study abroad annually. The obstacles for most are cost, opportunity, and access. So I lived in Italy for several years. I'm an Italian citizen. I worked for years as an art historical guide in Italy, specifically in Rome, but some of the other major cities. I currently teach at Sacred Heart University in Fairfield, Connecticut as an adjunct professor. And my frustration was that I really wanted to share with my students the transformative learning experience of being within the living classroom that certain incredible cities provide. So I felt frustrated that so many of my students were missing out on this transformative learning experience. So I decided to tackle the problem head on, and I'll present to you my proposed solution. So 2 weeks ago, I went to Rome with some kind of high-tech photography equipment and created 3D virtual reality tours of some of the major sites of artistic, historic, and cultural significance around the city. I created using 3D high-resolution photography, laser scanning, 360 photography. I virtually reconstructed some of the interiors of these sites and made a virtual tour. So I'm coupling this immersive visual experience with an interactive virtual tour, so students feel as though they're walking through a 3D space, and they can stop, click, and explore points of interest that are linked to audio, visual, and written content. So here are some of the sites that I covered while I was in Rome. Major sites of art, mostly art historical significance, but also historic and cultural significance as well. And I chose 2 to share with you. Here we have a classic for any art history course, the Mausoleum of Santa Costanza. It's a 4th century building. And I'm just going to go through, I won't give you the tour because we don't have time, but I can explain to you some of the advantages of using this type of technology. As you can see, the student moves around the space and can look all the way around. Oops. If I can get the mouse to work, there we go. There's these buttons here that allow you to zoom in for high resolution detail. You can zoom to different areas. There's a highlight reel. You can kind of see how it works here. So this church took about 2 hours to complete. This is a replica of the Sepulchre of Costanza, which is now in the Vatican Museums. Sorry, the mouse is a little difficult on here, but you can kind of see what I mean. Here we have Santa Maria sopra Minerva, which is a huge church. It's a basilica in Rome. It has works by Michelangelo, Filippino Lippi, the grave of Catherine of Siena, Cajetan, and Fra Angelico. Here's a dollhouse view and a floor plan. You can see that just as an example, because I'm currently working on creating the interactive tours with audio, visual, and textual elements added, that I put a little tag here. And so the student can go into that chapel, look at these 15th century frescoes, 1493. I brought my students in here specifically because we were reading Summa Contra Gentiles by Thomas Aquinas, and here he is, and it's an illustration of that work. So they explored these frescoes. You can zoom in for very high detail if the computer doesn't crash. There we are. And again, you can see the tag that I put in is just an example. There we go. You'd click and read all about this space. These little areas on the floor indicate places where you can zoom in and out and kind of the next step in the tour. I'll bring you to the altar and then we'll leave this space. Here's Catherine of Siena's body underneath the altar. And again, I'm setting this up so that students can see this in virtual reality headsets. So the experience will be really 3-dimensional. And if you turn around here, whoops. This is Christ the Redeemer by Michelangelo. Walking you through this, I'm trying to give a sense of the advantages of using this sort of tool, pedagogical tool. Let me jump back to my presentation. These are my students exploring the Minerva as they read Summa Contra Gentiles. And again, some of the advantages include this is an immersive, unforgettable experience. It's interactive, it's engaging. It does what video cannot. You're not passively going through a space, you're really interacting with it, you're exploring. It's high resolution. You can explore sculptures at different angles. You can consider their scale. You consider the context of yourself within this enormous space. And my little plug to you is please help me give access to students to sites that they may otherwise never experience. And here are some of my students. I'm pleased, just to conclude, I'm pleased to announce that I've received a fellowship with Sci-City to work on this project for 2 months over the summer and kind of get it off the ground, make some more tours. So thank you.
Thanks so much to Amy. And now we'll move on to the media concept, which is going to be presented with work from Anna Shechtman and Zachary Kitt.
Thank you, and thanks so much to Peter and Kathy and Doug and everyone at the DH Lab. Unfortunately, my partner, Zach Kitt, who is at the Jackson Institute at Yale, can't be here. He was a programmer before coming to Yale, and he's actually just about to graduate and be a programmer again. He has been working with me. I'm a PhD candidate in English Literature and Film and Media Studies, and I am working on a dissertation that is called The Media Concept, that's about the evolution of the term media in the second half of the 20th century, specifically about when media entered the vernacular and the ramifications that it had for different culture industries. So it's a very literal project. It's very word-based. And so I actually was inspired to work on it and think about it because I was fooling around on Ngram Viewer, which many of you may know, just Google interface here. You'll see that around, after World War II, there's this skyrocket in the occurrences of the word media in all the texts that, all the texts up to 2008 that Google Books has. And so I was interested in that phenomenon, and also interested in some of the different iterations or offshoots of the media concept and their evolutions over time. And so I wandered into the DH Lab and asked them about Ngram Viewer, and also if there was a way to have more control over it, because it sort of just culls from this massive amount of text that is Google Books. If you actually go in and it allows you to sort of click around and see which books in particular it's culling from, and sometimes you'll see that actually the metadata is wrong, and a book that it says that is from 1940 is in fact a book from 1812 that was republished in 1940, and it's just not very precise. And the fact that it goes up to 2008 is also not ideal because it doesn't go up to the present, and that is for all sorts of reasons involving copyright and law. So I wanted more control over Ngram Viewer and Google Books, and so I wandered into the DH Lab and asked them if I could get that. And they said that I would have to build it, essentially. And so I learned about a corpus. I learned about corpora, about building your own, basically scraping text from all aspects of the web, or if it's not digitized, digitizing it, and trying to create your own database, essentially, that then you can manipulate with various different tools, all of which I'm still, my learning curve, I will admit, is still very steep, and I'm very grateful to the patience of both Zach, my assistant, and everyone at the DH Lab. So I'll tell you a little bit about what Zach and I have done. We started with the Vogue corpus, which is available through the DH Lab. Thankfully, Yale has that. And so we have all of these PDFs of articles from Vogue from the 20th century, and we actually ran a Google algorithm called Word2Vec. Word embedding models are, as far as I can tell, the most interesting aspect of the textual digital humanities. They're just super exciting because they allow those who have any facility with the algorithm to track the semantic and syntactical relationships of words over time. How they do that is fairly complicated, and I can definitely talk to you afterwards, and also would absolutely point you to the blog posts of Ryan Huser from Stanford and Ben Schmidt from Northeastern, who are really facile and agile at writing in between in between the sort of lexicons of the humanities and of the computer sciences. But basically, they take all of the words in your corpus and they plot them visually in a space of n dimensions, multi-dimensional space. And the theory behind this is you can actually get related words from one query. So I can query media and find all the related words, and the principle is that these semantic and syntactical evolutions will be tracked by the company that a word keeps over time. And so here, we just query media in this Vogue corpus. You'll see one of the most interesting things for me to find is that, you know, in the 40s and 50s, you get a lot of, let's say, not very abstract, pretty concrete nouns. Manuscripts, criticisms, palettes, also they're all plural. And then as you move through time, you start to get adjectives. And also adjectives that might qualify as singular, like the consolidation of media as a singular concept. Cultural, historical, racial, political, religious. To me, that signals, I mean, this is a small data set still, Vogue, right? The word media might not show up as much in Vogue as it might in, say, the New York Times, but we're moving in that direction, Zach and I. So to me, that signals the consolidation of a concept because it's being qualified all of a sudden, as opposed to being substituted metaphorically or metonymically by other nouns. So then here's where things get really kind of psychedelic and interesting. So what Word2Vec allows you to play with is arithmetic, but linguistic arithmetic. So you're able, for example, to go into the corpus and give it an equation. So let's say you wanted to see how rigorous and extensive your corpus was. If it was really good, and again, this algorithm gets more precise the more text there is, so the bigger your corpus is. You could theoretically put in this query king plus man minus woman, and you would most likely get queen, because it's that smart, which is a little menacing, but also really interesting. So in the Vogue corpus, just for an example, if we put in this algorithm, or this equation, you'll see that in 1940, 50, 60, all of the most related words were in fact queen. Then interestingly, in 1970, I'm not sure why it's Harry, and the third most related word is queen, but I also thought it was kind of awesome that in the Vogue corpus, the most related word that should be queen is actually Thatcher in the 1980s. Just a glitch of history. So then Zach and I were just sort of playing around with more queries like this. We have a big list of them, and they're not, I'm still not quite sure what to do with them, but this interesting thing that you can do essentially is if you say media minus medium and you throw that into the computer, you'll hopefully be able to approximate something like it will take away, let's say, all of the words that are both the most related to media and both the most related to medium, and you'll try to get to a different element of the concept. To me, I was thinking about when I chose these particular ones to show you media minus medium, media plus arts, media minus press, I was trying to sort of get at these different aspects of the media concept, its relation to the concept of medium or platform, its relationship to the phenomenon of mass culture, its relationship to the proper, or to the article the, right? So media minus press, I was sort of trying to get at what, if you take away the sort of very activity of the press, is there some way to get this sort of environmental or atmospheric quality of media that's not actually professional, but is more sort of experiential? I mean, these are just aspirational algorithms here, but you get some really interesting weird stuff, like medium minus medium. The third most related word is Pacevic, who was a chairman of Condé Nast for much of the 20th century. So that's interesting and weird. Again, this is just the Vogue corpus, and so where Zach and I are going with this, this I thought was interesting, that media plus arts, over time you start to get these sort of what we would think of as mediums. So Zach and I started working on this with The Atlantic, and I'm actually now working with Richard So at McGill, who has access to the HathiTrust databases, and we're actually just sort of trying to put together a huge magazine corpus in the 20th century and run Word2Vec on that. But you'll see that The Atlantic one, for a variety of super interesting reasons, just didn't quite work. In that it's not big enough. We were only able to, just because of time and resources, Zach's and mine, not the DH Labs, we were not actually able to get all of the text from the Atlantic, but just the text that had the word media in them, and that just wasn't enough text for the word-to-vec algorithm to be effective. So you get these really, and the way we know that essentially, first of all, the way you know that is that before 1960, there's just not even enough text there at all to even to have data. Also, none of these are queen. Sometimes country, maintain, forage, bishop. It just didn't quite work. So hopefully, as we continue this project and we get a bigger and bigger corpus, and to be able we're hoping to actually be able to approximate the way that the media talked about media in the 20th century. So that's where we're at. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. And now I think, having failed once at being able to get the PowerPoint working correctly, I think we now can invite up Jasper Feinberg to talk about coeducation at Yale through the eyes of the pioneer. Again, managed to get it working. Thank you, Jasper.
Perfect. Thank you. So first of all, thank you all for being here, obviously. I'm a sophomore undergraduate at Yale studying mechanical engineering, and actually did this project as part of a Digital Humanities class at Yale, which is a seminar offered to all undergraduates. I believe some of the teachers of that actual class are in the audience, but I won't embarrass them by pointing at them specifically. So the goal of this project was to show how Yale became coeducational, but our true goal was to show how the use of digital multimedia could really bring that process to life. And given the time frame, I want to dive right into that. So our goal was to not just sort of give a textbook history of Yale's process to coeducation, but to really sort of make our audience feel a lot of the actual struggles, discrimination, and really just the context of this era. And we chose to do that by focusing on one person in particular as opposed to showing a broader spectrum. That person happened to be Margaret, who is currently an English professor here and was member of the second class of women at Yale. But before giving a full rundown of her story, I just want to sort of establish the context of coeducation at Yale. So as some of you may or may not know, Yale actually did not become coeducational until 1969. And it sort of became coeducational as the women's movement and broader movements at Yale itself began to strongly push for it. But it should be noted that Yale was not exactly a pioneer, despite the title of this project, in the field of coeducation. By 1897, 56% of all institutions were already coeducational. By the time that Yale actually became coeducational, that number was in the 80%. So to give sort of a map, this is Yale, obviously. The first school to become coeducational was Oberlin in 1837. Once Oberlin became coeducational, then about 9 more universities became coeducational in the 1850s, including Baylor, Lawrence, Antioch, but the movement still had not started. It was mostly small colleges, and the true shift towards coeducation had not begun. But that became much more pronounced with the beginning of the land-grant universities, especially in the western region, which, if you don't know, are large public institutions that usually began coeducational, and that really drove the push. HBCUs as well began to become coeducational in the late 1800s. Now, if we fast forward a little bit, by 1965, most schools had become coeducational. That included Harvard, UPenn, many of the schools in the West, such as Stanford, Caltech, etc. And about overall, I think 84% of colleges were coeducational. So by the time Yale actually became coeducational in 1969, they were far behind most of their peers. This was not necessarily a great achievement, but nonetheless, they had a very large transition to make. Shifting a school from solely male to a coeducational institution is no easy transition, and that's really what we wanted to focus on through the eyes of Margaret Homans herself and looking at her experiences. So with that in mind, Margaret Homans, starting with her childhood, was born in Boston, and she actually attended something called the Commonwealth School, which is a small private school in Boston. And she credits that with sort of her ability to get into a place like Yale so early, become one of the first members of her class. Obviously, she had privileges that many other women did not have during that era. And she actually taught at Yale, she decided to attend Yale not really because it had just become coeducational, but just because of the strength of its academic programs. She had a teacher in high school who had gone to Yale for English, and he sort of described to her sort of a utopia for the English language and studies of it. So she chose Yale mostly just for its academic achievements, and the fact that it had become coeducational allowed her to do that. But it was not that she desired to be a pioneer, she simply wanted to study English. So Yale, to give a very, very brief history given the time constraint, decided to admit women in the 1960s after a variety of student protests. So the main factor that shifted during this era was that Yale's actual admission criterion began to shift. President Kingman Brewster decided to begin to admit people based on merit as opposed to family connections, wealth, etc., which seems like a very obvious decision to us at the time, but earlier in this era, merit had been a factor but not the main factor in admissions. And so once merit became the true determining factor between who was admitted and not admitted, then many more people from public institutions, public high schools, Western high schools began to attend Yale, and that sort of produced a demographic shift amongst the men at Yale. And eventually that led to protests in what's called Mayday, which was a series of protests that tried to show Kingman and Brewster that the student body was behind this shift towards coeducation. So upon feeling a lot of student pressure, faculty finally decided to get behind this, and they decided to create proposals, etc. And finally, in 1969, Yale decided to become coeducational. And again, to establish some context, the shift was not easy. We included some multimedia here of letters that were sent to Kingman and Brewster, some calling women indignant for showing their knees and thighs in public, calling them prostitutes if they were to even show any sort of skin. Many letters saying that if women dominated Yale, Yale would end. You know, they wanted their sons to be able to go to Yale, and they could not do that if women somehow attended. So by the time Homans got here, it was not exactly an easy transition. And I think that's really reflected in her anecdotes and her stories. So starting with academics, she describes being used to being in a simply coeducational environment. To her, it was not significant that women were now in these classes, but to many of the boys, it was. So she described being in a classroom, especially in her English classes, and being one of only one or two women there, and how the pressure was always on her to speak whenever any topic related to femininity came up, and how outside of that, she felt very reticent to speak. She did not feel as though she could really develop a voice. One of the things that she described as lucky was being in classrooms with some female professors who actually encouraged her to study female literature and feminist critique, and she felt like that was really the main academic experience, as opposed to reading just books by what she described as, and I quote, dead white men. Outside of the classroom, Homans became involved heavily in the Women's Abortion Referral Center at Yale, which is currently in the, it was formerly in what is now the AFAM House, if any of you know where that is. She also briefly joined the Glee Club and several other clubs on campus, although she felt like she was usually admitted to those clubs solely because she was a woman, and most of the clubs at the time had a quota where they were supposed to try to achieve equal gender balance, so there was a lot of pressure to admit women. Some of the experiences that I thought were most poignant, however, were just her personal experiences. So women were all housed in Vanderbilt Hall during this era, and there was a glass door to Vanderbilt Hall. And Homans described that door as being symbolic, where she felt as the women could see sort of the freedom they were promised in coeducation, but they couldn't actually achieve it because there was a guard at that door who wouldn't let them out at night, etc., whereas none of the other halls had a guard or such a door. Another experience she mentioned was how she sewed herself what she described as a uniform, which was essentially a long dress. And she wore that every day to essentially cover up any part of her body because she was not used to being sort of viewed as a female body as opposed to just another student. And she wanted to hide herself. And this uniform was a way for her to do that. And finally, she actually described how she refused to walk down the graduation hallway in her cap and gown because she felt as though that was encouraging an all-male tradition and she wanted to rebel. And on the whole, I would not describe her transition as easy, but she was able to adapt to Yale and find places where she was comfortable. This heat map shows areas on campus where she felt comfortable and uncomfortable. And by sort of carving out certain areas on campus, she was able to sort of adapt, find other women, and create an environment in which she could learn. But obviously looking forward, her experiences, I think, are emblematic of the path we still have to go to achieve true coeducation at Yale. And I just want to leave you with the idea of, like, what does coeducation mean? Is it truly just having women in our classrooms, or is it allowing a fully immersive and equal educational experience, and how can we achieve that? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much to Jasper. And now I'd like to invite Nina Warszawa up, who is going to speak on the relationship between the style and impact of judicial opinions.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much to the Digital Humanities Lab for all of the help they've given me, all the support they've given me with my research. And thanks especially to Doug Duheim, who has helped me tirelessly with the minutiae of this project and related work. I'm incredibly grateful. I'm going to be talking about the relationship between the style and impact of judicial opinions. So judicial opinions are the texts that judges write in order to explain and justify their decisions. And these texts make up the common law. When judges decide new cases, they have a legal duty to follow the rules and reasoning set out in previous opinions. The more cases that a previous opinion appears in, the more influence it has on the common law. So I examine whether and how an opinion's style is related to its impact, to its legal impact. My results show that an opinion style is a significant predictor of its impact, where impact is measured by the number of cases that will cite it. So to give you a brief overview of my approach, my data set includes almost all majority opinions from the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals during a 12-year period. This court is an important federal appellate court which answers to the U.S. Supreme Court. It's also the court where Neil Gorsuch served as a judge before joining the Supreme Court last year. So first I derived a set of measurable stylistic features from the literature on judicial writing. I then used natural language processing to detect and measure these features in each of my opinions. My dependent variable is the number of cases that cite to the opinion, and I use this as a measure of an opinion's impact on case law or its power as a precedent. My independent variables, on the top I've listed my stylistic features of interest. On the bottom are my control variables. For the most part, on the stylistic features, I measure these on a per-word basis, meaning that, for example, with citations to authority, I counted how many times an opinion cites statutes and other cases per word. First, I'll give you an overview of my data using some charts to give you a sense of what they look like, and then I'll show my statistical model and my statistical results. So here you can see how judges line up on lexical diversity. Lexical diversity is basically the range of vocabulary of an opinion. It's simply the number of unique words over the total words. So you can see here that the judges range from about 20% unique words to 28% unique words. Male judges are in blue, female judges are in maroon, and Gorsuch is highlighted in red. Here's informality. This is basically informal usage per word. And you can see here that the judges range from about 0 on informality to about 0.01, which means 1 per 100 words is informal, with Gorsuch at the high end. Here's certainty. So this is certainty, terms expressing certainty per word. So judges range on this from about 1 to 3.5 certainty terms per 1,000 words. And you can see the female judges clustering on the low end of certainty, but what's interesting is they also cluster it on the low end of hesitancy. So this represents hesitant or tentative expressions, and Gorsuch again is on the high end of this. So here's my main statistical model. This is a mixed model, which is a type of regression that suits the structure of my data. To give you a summary, my results show that stylistic qualities run with a case's impact or precedential power in systematic ways. My style variables are on the top in the blue rectangle. All of these variables, all of these stylistic features, with the exception of passive voice, are statistically significant predictors of citations. And recall that my dependent variable is the number of cases that cite the opinion. Most of these factors are positively related to citations, but two of them, certainty and informality, are negative predictors of citations. So I'll take my remaining time to talk through these results, since it's not altogether obvious, I think, just from looking at the values what they mean, because for one, my dependent variable is log transformed. So as word count goes up by 1, citing cases goes up by, as word count goes up by 1%, citing cases also goes up by about 1%. As reading level goes up by 1 grade level, citations goes up by 5%. As lexical diversity goes up by 1%, cites go up by 2%. As authority per word goes up by 0.01, so this means 1 additional citation to a case or statute per 100 words, cites goes up by 27%. As references to people by proper name goes up by 1 in 100, citing cases goes up by 20%, and that's the same for references to litigants by technical terms, plaintiff or defendant. So it seems that just referring to people regardless of how is a good thing for citations. As certainty per word goes up by 0.001, 1 in 1,000, citing cases goes down by 4%. But as hesitancy goes up by the same amount, 1 in 1,000, citing cases goes up. So certainty is a negative predictor of citations, but hesitancy is a positive predictor. Semicolons goes up by 1 in 1,000, cites goes up by 3%. And then as informality per word goes up by 1 in 100, citing cases goes down by 20%. So informality is strongly negatively related with citations. So to just wrap up, I also ran a regression with a normal regression with judge fixed effects, which generated very similar results to this model. The fixed effects model shows that my variables explain 45% of the variance in citations, and that my stylistic variables alone, just these 11 stylistic features, explain 15% of the variance in the number of cases that will cite an opinion. Thank you.
Thanks very much to Nina. And now I'd like to invite up participants in a project called Digital Humanity, Jessica Ambrosio and Maria Gargiulio. Apologies for that.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Ambrosio, and I'm a junior majoring in computer science.
Hi, my name is Maria Gargiulio, and I'm also a junior majoring in statistics and data science and Spanish, and we're the co-presidents of Yale Code for Good. Today, we're presenting on what we call Digital Humanity, and we'd like to begin with this brief anecdote. The first program most people write is a simple hello world. It's time we start seriously considering and talking about the impact that our code can and does have on the world in which we live.
So as a club, we have come to define coding for good as applying software tools and techniques to solve problems that a community or society faces. So what this means is that we seek to design and develop programs that not only address the technical aspects of problems, but also consider the impact that these technologies will have on the people who make use of them. Is the impact positive? Does it benefit them beyond just merely solving a technical issue?
So you might be asking now, How do you do that? So we do this by recruiting teams of 4 to 6 students to work in collaboration with nonprofit organizations, Yale student groups, or local government agencies to address socially conscious problems. And these can cover all types of different things. There's no one problem that is or is not socially conscious. Many things are different in many ways. We currently have 3 project teams, 2 of whose work we'd like to highlight today.
So our first project is the Road Sign Manager. And for this project, we partnered with Make Haven, a local makerspace in downtown New Haven, and the New Haven Department of Transportation to address transportation traffic issues. The main problem to solve here was that commuters did not know where and how many parking spaces were available at a given location. To solve this problem, Make Haven modified the hardware of multiple road signs so that they could be programmable. Nevertheless, someone still had to go down to the road sign and change it manually. To this end, our team built a web application that connects the road sign so that officials can simply access the web application and update any information on the road sign in real time. In addition to improving the parking system in New Haven, this software also provides a great mechanism for important updates in case of emergencies. If you want to hear more about this project, the team who worked on it will be later presenting during the poster session.
The next project that we'd like to talk about today has been done in collaboration with Cushy Baby. So Cushy Baby is actually a nonprofit organization founded at Yale, started in the CEID as part of a class project for, I think, a mechanical engineering course a few years ago. It operates in India. In founding their organization, the Cushy Baby team sought to address issues in the Indian medical system. Currently, doctors are required to keep paper records. An issue with these records is they need to travel with the doctors as they move. They often become disorganized and files get lost. And this is particularly problematic for women and their newborn children. The issue with this is that they need to see doctors at certain points post-birth. And if doctors are losing files, there's no record of which vaccinations they've received when they've gotten past appointments. So to deal with this, the Cushy Baby team made a simple wearable. It's a little necklace that the child wears, and it stores all of their information in it. When doctors go to see the children and their mothers, they can simply load their data into a web application if they have internet access, and if not, there's an Android app. Multiple people can view the information when they're seeing the child offline, whenever they need to. And this is really helpful because it deals with the missing record issue and also lets people look at information in various places. The Code for Good team has been contributing to this project by helping Cushy Baby update some of their models. One of the big things that the team cares about is risk assessment. They like to triage their patients so that newborns and their mothers who are particularly high risk for various types of health issues can be viewed according to the relevant priority. So yeah, and this is just a little image of what the dashboard of the Cushy Baby application looks like. Now you might be asking yourself, why do we do this? Why was Code for Good founded? So Code for Good was founded last spring, and the reason it was founded is because there was no real space available on campus for technically inclined students to work on socially conscious problems.
So there are a lot of wonderful places where our students can go and work at, but the impact that they can make there will rarely reach the people who need their help the most. So this is your typical job fair. These are the kind of companies that we usually see that any CS or data science major will look at. And you know what? These are wonderful places to work at. They are doing amazing stuff, but they only present a partial image of what can be done with technology.
And to end off today, we'd like to leave you all with a question, or perhaps a challenge. How can you do more good with the technology that you use or know how to use?
So if you have an answer to this question or just want to share your ideas with us, please contact us at codeforgood@yale.edu. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica and Maria, and to all of our presenters during this first initial lightning talks, part of the conference. I think at this point I'd like to invite up members of our roundtable discussion.